Somebody asked me a while back, how come Tacoma does not have any sort of big IT company like Amazon or Microsoft or anything like that? And that's a good question because that has come up a few different times, even at my own job. And there's a few reasons why we have not. Tacoma actually is called Tacoma as well, right? There's all these different little nicknames, but it has about 20 different tech companies here. They're all smaller, but there's about 20 different tech companies here. So it's not like we don't have tech. We do. Um, the other part of that is that the city has to use a lot more of its own leverage to attract more tech companies and to encourage them to expand. So a big part of this is there needs to be open communication about how do you expand these jobs and to retain more, right? But we do have a tech industry here. When it comes to Amazon and Microsoft and all the tech companies recently have laid off quite a bit. Prior to COVID, Microsoft was really looking at coming into Tacoma, and in fact, they identified a building, which is the old DeVita building, which is called the Sheldberg building. That's probably wrong. Something like that. But at any rate, that building was going to be Amazon or Microsoft. And then, of course, COVID happened and it just wrecked everything. A lot of the things that we were supposed to have in Tacoma didn't happen. And that sucks. But with that said, I don't think it's completely something that Amazon or Microsoft would not do. I think what you're seeing with Amazon, there's a retrenching because they overhired during COVID. Same thing with Microsoft. And so they're trying to figure out a happy balance. Now, with all of that said, there is an opportunity for Microsoft to probably come into Tacoma before Amazon would or anybody else. And the reason is because Microsoft seems to be more into education and they're more into community support. I'm not saying the others don't, but just looking at the track record of what Microsoft has done in other places, namely like Atlanta, and what they've done there in terms of just boosting Black businesses and all the different incentives and their diversity, equity, and inclusion and the different things that they do, it's pretty tremendous. So given that, and given Tacoma being the city that has probably the most diversity per capita than all these other cities here, including Seattle. Now, when we're talking about Asian population, no. I mean, Seattle and Bellevue take that, but when we're talking about Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, that we definitely have a lot more. And then there are certain Asian populations that we have more of per capita than Seattle does. It's just how it is. But if Microsoft wanted to really engage more, it's easier for it to do. Now, the problem with that is, and there's a few different issues. One of the big problems is Tacoma does not quite have the infrastructure. I think this is the biggest piece. It doesn't have the infrastructure for a Microsoft just yet. Parking is one of the big things, right? When we're talking about big tech companies, parking does come to mind, and that's something that we have to consider. Now, it's not completely dud because the area where people have talked so much about with the homeless is there's under the 405 bridge. I think it's the 405. I can't remember. But there's a bridge here in Tacoma that connects the I-5 into downtown Tacoma. Under those bridges, it's already paved parking. It's owned by the state. The city of Tacoma could buy those two lots, put fences around them, which is probably the smart thing to do. There's an area there where you can technically have a bike trail. And so you can connect these two areas with a bike trail if you wanted to. It's kind of set up that way. And you could basically have paid parking. You could probably park at least a good couple hundred cars underneath both bridges. And it's not a space that can be utilized for anything. Both are already paved. You just need to go in and stripe it. It's kind of, and put fence around it. It's kind of it. And that would go a long way. The big issue is the infrastructure. We don't have enough apartments. We can't get developers to build up enough. They're building a lot of short buildings. I've said this before, but until we start getting buildings that's 10 stories, 11, 12, 15, 20 stories tall, that can hold 300 people apiece, we're not going to put a dent in what we need. The city has identified and said that we're growing by 5,000 people per year all the way from now until the year 2040. So we're talking 127,000 people are going to be living extra in Tacoma by 2040. We're already at 220,000 people at the beginning of this decade. So in 2020, we were at 220 people. And so we're adding 5,000 people. We've already added 15,000 people, theoretically, from the start of 2020 up until now. So we're growing very, very fast. And yet we don't have enough housing to handle anything else. We're just getting enough housing for the people moving here. That's not enough. There are still people who are waiting to come into Tacoma, but there's not enough housing. The apartments that are being built, there's a lot of them, but it's still not quite enough. I think that when we're looking at all of the housing that's going to open up, we're talking probably 7,000 units, 7,000 to 8,000 units downtown. That's a lot, but it's not enough to really do much. So if you bring in an employer like Microsoft, there will be people that will be hired because we don't have enough people here to satisfy all those jobs. Now, with that in mind, there are a large number of Amazon executives or people who are higher ups who live in Tacoma. Large populations. Don't get it twisted. It's not like, even without Microsoft and Amazon, the Tacoma does pretty well because a lot of their people live here. So that's a big part of why we need more housing. So putting an employer like that in would do wonders for Tacoma. We're already getting a lot of benefit from that, but we would have to have enough housing to accommodate it. And then the other part comes into infrastructure. Now, we recently, a big, huge company, a paper mill, uses about, 4 million gallons of water a day? They're the biggest, or more, the biggest water user in the entire city. They use more of it than anything else combined. And so that is one of those types of things where we have the infrastructure if you need water. We got that. We have it in terms of what that site is going to be in the future, because now that's going to be leveled and they're going to put something else there eventually. But it's going to be something that's industrial. When it comes to data storage, Tacoma doesn't really have that. And Microsoft, Amazon, all those tech companies need big, giant data centers. Now, one thing the city could do is really entice one of those companies to put a data center here, because we would be, and say, here, have the land for free, put the data center here and hire a minimum of 25 people making whatever an hour. That's probably the fastest, easiest way to get Microsoft or Amazon here, because they're going to need data centers no matter what they do. But having something like that here is supporting the infrastructure that's needed, because both companies are very, very data driven and they use up a lot of resources, mainly to store everything and to do all the things that they need to do. Now, we do have a very good internet infrastructure. So if you look at downtown, the infrastructure is really, really good. We punch above our weight when it comes to that. So we have a lot of pluses and we have a lot of minuses when it comes to attracting tech companies. And we just have to keep fixing the minuses. A lot of it dealt with, we don't have enough entertainment downtown, eateries, things like that. That's quickly changing. Now the problem is we don't have the buildings. We don't have the data centers. You know, putting in an office here would require now a new office building. We're out of space. There was a time when Tacoma had too many houses. They were upside down, and now we don't have enough houses. There was a time until recently, last year, where we had a bunch of office space. Now it's not the case. So we're running out of space because we've had so many companies move in, take up 20,000 square feet, 35,000. And since we haven't built offices in a long time, office buildings, we're really starting to lose a lot of that. We have a lot of co-working businesses coming into play. They're gobbling up large footprints. So we don't have the office space, the modern office space that they need. So the economy has to fix itself. So Tacoma's issue is the economy. The economy and the interest rate to borrow money has to go down so that more people can buy homes, because that's part of the issue. Two, developers need lower interest so they can actually get the money to build these properties. All that's lit money. Money's too expensive right now. So the housing is getting a bubble again. Not a bubble, but it's getting a glass ceiling where we can't go up because interest rates are too high to get money. So the projects that are already in the pipeline being developed, great. They're going to do a huge infusion instantly of people into downtown, but newer development is going to start slowing down until that interest rate gets fixed. You'll still have projects, but not nearly as fast. The other part of that is that we now have to convince developers to build an office building that is going to be suitable for something like an Amazon or a Microsoft. And that is where we run into a problem. The cost to rent money, we have had plenty of office space for decades and no problems. Now we have a huge need for it. There has to be a company like Microsoft saying, look, we're coming to Tacoma. We need at least 50,000 square feet. For a developer to say, okay, you sign on that line, I'll build an 18-story building that's going to have 250,000 square feet. And then Microsoft can take a big chunk of that and also have it written that the rest of that is something that they can expand to, or another good portion they can expand to. It's going to take something like that at this point to get a Microsoft or even an Amazon. And again, they're not doing any hiring. They're actually letting people go by the buckets because they are not in the profitability state that they once were. But they're still doing very well, and they're still hiring in different areas, but they're keeping their purse closer to the heart because money is expensive right now. So hopefully that explains it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Be sure to join the Discord down in the description box below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.